All right, let's talk about something that happens to you probably dozens of times a day, something you feel but maybe don't think about. Why on earth do websites load so much faster the second time you visit them? You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You click a link to a new site and you wait. A couple of seconds, maybe more. But when you go back, bam, it's right there. Instant. What is going on? It almost feels like a little bit of internet magic. But it's not magic at all. It's actually one of the most important, fundamental features of the web as we know it. And we're going to pull back the curtain on this little mystery today. Yeah, that little speed boost you get, that is 100% on purpose. It's not a fluke. It's a really, really clever system that's always working in the background, specifically designed to make your life online faster and way less frustrating. Okay, so to get why the second visit is so zippy, we first have to break down why that first visit can feel, well, kind of sluggish. It's actually a pretty wild journey your browser goes on. So, the first time you hit a site, your browser has zero information. It has to do everything from scratch. First, a DNS lookup. That's basically like looking up a business in the phone book to get its street address. Then it has to securely connect to that address. Then it has to ask the server for all the files, download every single image, all the fonts, all the code, and only after all that can it finally build the page you actually see. Phew, that's a lot. But here's where it all changes. On that second visit, your browser isn't starting from scratch anymore. It remembers. It has a memory. And that memory, that one simple, powerful concept that makes all the difference in the world, it's called caching. So what is caching? It's really just the process of your web browser saving pieces of a website right there on your own computer. Think of it like this. Your browser takes a look at a website, grabs all the heavy stuff that doesn't change much, and keeps a local copy. That way, it doesn't have to go all the way across the internet to get it next time. And this right here really paints the picture, doesn't it? Look at that top line. That's the first visit. It's this long chain of events. Now look at the bottom. The second visit? It gets to skip almost all of those steps. It just grabs the files it already saved in its memory and builds the page. It's an incredible shortcut. Now, caching isn't just one single thing. It's actually more like a whole team of different technologies all working together to make things fast. Let's meet the key players in what you could call the web's speed-up crew. So our four main crew members are the browser cache, the DNS cache, something called content delivery networks or CDNs, and persistent connections. Each one of them solves a different piece of the speed puzzle. Let's break them down. Okay, first up is the browser cache. This is the real workhorse. It's the part that saves all those static files. You know, the things that don't really change visit to visit, like the company logo, background images, the specific fonts the site uses. By keeping those right on your device, you skip downloading gigabytes of data over and over again. Next, we've got the DNS cache. Remember that first step, looking up the site's address in the phone book? Well, the DNS cache is like adding that number to your phone's contact list. Your computer just remembers the site's actual numerical IP address, so it never has to do that slow lookup ever again. And then there are CDNs. This is where things get really clever. See, physical distance actually matters on the internet. So smart websites use CDNs to store copies of themselves on servers all around the world. That way, instead of pulling data from a server halfway across the planet, your request just goes to a server that might be in the next city over. It's a huge time saver. And finally, we have persistent connections. Once your browser goes through all the work of making a secure connection, it's smart enough to say, hey, let's just keep this line open for a bit. This means it can reuse that same connection for future requests, instead of going through that whole digital handshake process every single time. Now, you might be thinking, well, what happens if the website's logo does change? Good question. Developers are in control here. They use special rules called cache control headers to tell your browser exactly how long it should trust its saved files before it needs to check back in for a newer version. It's the perfect balance of speed and freshness. Okay, so we've covered the how. We know the mechanics of it. But what's the big picture here? Why is this whole system so incredibly important for the internet we use every day? This quote really just says it all. Can you imagine if every single time you clicked a link, it felt like the very first time? If you had to re-download every single logo and image on every page, the web would feel painfully slow, and the sheer amount of data flying around would clog up the entire network. Caching isn't just a convenience, it's what makes the web usable. Ultimately, it's this beautiful, invisible orchestra of systems that makes the internet feel like the internet. fast, snappy, and responsive. It's the unsung hero working tirelessly in the background, turning what would be long waits into what feels like instant access. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? The next time a page just pops up on your screen instantly, you'll know why. But it leaves you with a bigger question. What other incredible, invisible systems are humming away in the background right now, making our whole digital world possible?
We are about to reach 100 subscribers. Please like, share, and subscribe to complete the target.